In her dire circumstances, a supermarket cashier gives away free diapers to a struggling adolescent mother without realizing that he will lose his job for a simple act of charity. The following day, a helicopter flies close to his apartment complex and delivers a startling revelation about the young mother, leaving him to wonder who she truly is. Enjoy today's story, which is full of touching surprises and surprising turns. Ben, a new cashier who was still getting used to his job, was having a calm day when he was scanning items at the register when he noticed a teenage mother in the baby aisle holding a baby close to her chest. The young woman's face showed a storm of worry as her eyes darted between two items, baby formula and diapers. She grabbed the diapers. She touched the package, her fingers shaking. She glanced at the price tag before turning to the formula. For a little while, she remained frozen between necessity and sacrifice, and with uncertainty evident in the lines of her wrinkled brow, her palm hovered over it. Eventually, with a trembling breath, she selected the formula. Her strides were slow, her stance burdened by unsaid struggles from behind the counter, and she brushed her hand over the diapers one final time before turning to face the cashier. Ben paid close attention, understanding her story without the need for words. The young woman approached the register, clutching her infant and setting the formula can on the counter with trembling hands. Her silence spoke volumes. Ben paused for a moment, looking at the baby nestled against her chest, its tiny eyes blinking sleepily, unaware of the struggle unfolding just the formula. Her eyes lowered as though trying to avoid drawing attention. He noticed her gaze drift toward the diapers, a look of longing in her eyes. It was clear she wanted both items, but the thought of affording them both was too much to bear. Ben asked in a quiet voice so as not to frighten her, and she nodded without looking at him. After taking a deep breath, Ben reached into his pocket and took out his wallet. He swiped his card across the reader and handed her the diapers. "You forgot the diapers," he said, gently gesturing to the package in her cart. Her head snapped up, and for a brief moment, panic flickered in her eyes. "I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ben said in a firm but kind tone, "You can pay me back whenever you're able." She looked at Ben, overwhelmed, and managed only a whispered thank you. These diapers weren't just necessities. They were hope wrapped in soft packaging, a silent answer to her silent prayers, and evidence that kindness could still find her even in her darkest moments. The woman's lips parted, but no words came out as her eyes filled with tears that spilled over as she held the diapers close. Ben nodded slightly, meeting her gaze, and said, "Take care of your little one," in a steady voice. As the woman left, the muttering behind her grew louder, and several customers exchanged disapproving looks, their whispers now becoming full voices aimed at Ben. "Do you think that's fair?" One man complained, crossing his arms and staring at Ben. "You just gave away products," saying, "This is a store, not a charity." "Yeah, I don't know about that." A woman added, shaking her head and adjusting her purse. "People shouldn't just get things for free," she said. As he looked up into the eyes of the small group, Ben's fingers tightened around the register, his hands freezing in place, his heartbeat in his chest. Some of them appeared irritated, while others were just perplexed, but none of them seemed to comprehend what had just happened. He opened his mouth to explain, but nothing came out. He knew his actions were right, but the weight of the store's policies settled heavily on his shoulders before he could react. Later that evening, after the store had calmed down, Ben found himself in Mr. Carter's office. His eyes darted to the murmuring customers before focusing back on Ben. Ben could feel the tension in the air as Mr. Carter's gaze never wavered. "I heard about what happened today. You gave away merchandise, and that's a clear violation of store policy." The manager said in a steady voice, "You didn't follow procedure and we can't allow that. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to let you go." Ben nodded, his stomach sinking, unable to claim he had done kindly, but he knew there was no place for exceptions because the principle was clear. Their quick handshake felt definitive as Mr. Carter gave him his last check. Later that evening, Ben turned and left the office. In his apartment, he took out his notebook and started writing down ideas in the dim light of his desk lamp. He couldn't afford to waste time feeling sorry for himself while working. He could not afford to waste time on things like odd delivery jobs, local cafes, or retail establishments. He knew that tomorrow he would begin his job search, but the uncertainty of the future loomed large, and he started to get tired. He fell asleep, but his morning took an unexpected turn instead of his alarm. Ben was awakened by a steady, low hum. Before Ben could comprehend what was happening, a sleek black helicopter was descending into the tiny parking lot behind his apartment building, swirling dust and leaves in its wake as it drew interested neighbors to their windows. That grew louder by the second he rubbed the sleep from his eyes and shuffled to the window and froze. His heart pounded as he cautiously approached the door after hearing a strong knock. When he opened it, he discovered two men in dark suits standing in the corridor. Ben Foster was asked in a steady, polite voice, and he replied, "Yeah," but it was clear that he was confused. The taller man held out his hand and said, "Good morning, Mr. Foster. My name is William, and this is my colleague Daniels. We're here on behalf of Mr. Harris." The name struck Ben like a lightning bolt, and his eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, Mr. Harris, you mean the multimillionaire who owns half of downtown real estate and all those IT companies?" William acknowledged that he was the one and only. Ben gazed, trying to make sense of it. For years, he had idolized Mr. Harris, a talented philanthropist and businessman who appeared to turn everything he touched into gold. However, what could someone like him possibly want with Ben? William went on, "We have a question for you. Did you help a young mother at your store yesterday?" Ben blinked in surprise. "Yes, I did help her." "What happened? Is she okay?" After confirming that she was safe and okay, William paused and said, "Do you know she's the daughter of Mr. Harris?" Ben's eyes grew wide in, "Are you telling me that she is actually his daughter?" Surprise? William nodded once more, confirming that we were serious. Ben found it difficult to comprehend the realization that the woman from yesterday was desperate and broke. The father of basics was able to purchase the entire store. Ben's forehead furrowed in perplexity, but why was she having such a hard time that she couldn't even purchase diapers? How does that occur? William was hesitant to state, "It's a family matter," but let's just say that, even for individuals like the Harris family, things aren't always as they seem. Daniels, who had been silent, spoke calmly, "But earnest, Mr. Harris wants to thank you directly and will tell you everything about his daughter and their predicament." Ben wavered between interest and fear, but as William pointed to the helicopter that was waiting, he couldn't help but grab his jacket and find out more. Ben followed them outside as he climbed into the chopper, and the sound of the rotors filled the air. As the helicopter made a soft landing on the estate's private helipad, neighbors watched from their windows with a mixture of wonder and fascination. When Ben emerged, he looked over the magnificent property, but there was just one person waiting. Mr. Harris, who was well-dressed, came up to Ben and held out his hand calmly. "Mr. Foster." Ben nodded, unsure of what to anticipate, but Harris's expression softened and there was a hint of gratitude mixed with sadness in his eyes. "It's about my daughter, the woman you helped yesterday. You have no idea what that meant to her and to me." Harris started by firmly shaking Ben's hand and saying, "Thank you for coming. I wanted to speak with you personally." As they sat down, Harris motioned Ben to a neighboring bench. He took a long breath before continuing in a steady but emotional voice, "She made a mistake. Harris made a poor decision by initially putting her trust in a young man named John, a friend from high school. At first, he seemed charming, encouraging, and ambitious, but it soon became clear that John was only interested in her name, her connections, and the advantages her family could offer." Ben leaned forward, focusing on Harris, and they began dating. Harris persisted in his regretful tone, saying that she believed in him despite my warning and even turned away from her family to be with him because she was certain that it was the right choice. However, life doesn't always go as planned, so he paused with his hands clasped tightly, and she became pregnant. For a while, John stayed, playing the role of a supportive partner until the responsibilities of fatherhood became too real. Gradually, he started to distance himself, making excuses to avoid his obligations, and one day, he abruptly vanished without saying anything. As Harris continued to speak in a quieter voice, Ben felt a wave of sympathy. She was too embarrassed to tell her family what had happened and instead took on odd jobs to earn money in an effort to support herself and her child, and she didn't want me to know how much she was struggling. Harris's voice cracked a little, but he steadied himself. "I only found out about it from someone else, so I went straight to her after learning the truth." I love her more than anything in the world, Mr. Foster, and I brought her and the baby back home where they belong." Ben stayed silent and his heart heavy as he listened. Yesterday, Harris continued to soften his voice as she told me what had happened at that store. She didn't have enough money to buy formula and diapers for her child, so she was desperate and afraid to ask for help. You have no idea how much that act of kindness meant to her, and she told me that you didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions, just helped. I can never thank you enough for that." Ben shifted uneasily, brushing off the praise. Harris grinned slightly and said, "You'd be surprised how few people would do what you did. My daughter wanted to thank you herself, so he up and gestured toward the estate, saying, 'Come inside,' where she was waiting to see you." Ben trailed Harris into the huge foyer, the elegance of the house hardly noticeable as his thoughts swirled with doubt. In the sitting room, she was waiting for the young mother he had assisted, her eyes full of thankfulness and a twinge of anxiety as she held her infant. "This is Maria, my daughter, Mr. Foster." Mr. Harris smiled proudly as he gestured toward her. Maria spoke up, her voice quivering a little, and she said, "Thank you so much for everything you did yesterday. I don't know how I would have handled it without your kindness." Ben shifted uneasily and smiled modestly. She firmly shook her head, saying, "No, it wasn't nothing. You didn't just help, you treated me with dignity when I couldn't even ask for it." Her comments were impactful. "It was nothing, really. I just did what anyone would do." "Ben, but before he could respond," she added, "when we went back to thank you, we learned that you lost your job because of me. I felt terrible. You didn't deserve that." Ben shrugged, attempting to dismiss it, saying that it's not your fault and that things like that happen. Mr. Harris came forward with a small package. "We want to make amends, but we can't change what happened." Ben was hesitant to accept it. His voice wavered when he opened it and saw a stack of bills that were considerably higher than the price of diapers. "This is too much," Ben murmured. "Think of it as a method to pay for your college fees. We've heard about how hard you've been working, so this is the least we can do." Harris put a gentle hand on his shoulder. Ben's hands shook. "I'm not sure how to express my gratitude. I can't. And you should, Maria, and I insist," Harris added with a kind grin. Maria nodded, her warm eyes. "Please, Mr. Foster, you deserve this." Harris went on to say, "There's one more thing. You lost your job, but I'd like to offer you something better, a position at my company. You've shown integrity and compassion, qualities we value deeply, so if you're willing, there's a place for you." Ben's heart raced as Harris's words replayed in his head. A position at his company didn't seem real too good to be true. He had worked so hard juggling jobs and sacrificing his own dreams just to make ends meet, but now here was the opportunity he had always wanted. Everything around him became hazy as his mind was overflowing with memories. He recalled his mother's words, "Kindness will come back to you, Ben. It may take time, but it always finds its way back." He had always believed in those words, but in that moment, it felt like a stroke of luck. How could his small act of kindness lead him to this real job, a chance at a future he never imagined was possible, a job that would allow him to follow his dream and create a life he was proud of? He looked at the infant in the young mother's arms, then back at Mr. Harris. The weight of everything nearly overwhelmed him. As he found his voice, his palm shook. "I'm not sure how to express my gratitude. This is more than I could have ever imagined." If this story resonated with you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Mr. Harris's smile was warm, and you deserve it, Ben. You've demonstrated that kindness can alter everything. We appreciate your time and hope to see you in the future video. Your support enables us to keep telling powerful stories to the world.